Hello, everyone. This is Byron Lehman, and this is the Jittery Goat YouTube channel. And I also have a website. It's entitled The Jittery Goat. You'll find it at jitteryg.com. That's where you'll find my short stories, flash fiction, vignettes, microfiction, whatever you want to call it. And also, you'll find the links to my books that are on Amazon. So make sure you hit the comment or hit the subscribe button. But also, if you'd like to leave some comments, I'd appreciate that. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about a vignette in a moment, but I will put this in the description section. I'll put the link to that story. And the story or the vignette is called Sticks. And it's just it's an exercise I did just in dialogue. And it's based upon the expression. Sometimes you hear these expressions, you don't know where they come from. But this particular expression is, boy, that guy got the wrong end of the stick. I mean, we've heard that a couple times. How come I always get the wrong end of the stick? And as if there's a right end. But anyway, I'll put the description of that vignette down in the description section so you can link to it. But like I mentioned, it's for me, it was an exercise in dialogue. I think as writers, it's important to have good dialogue and stories, because dialogue is something that moves the stories. It helps the character move the story. It takes the weight off your shoulders as a writer, and you put that load on the character. Let the character move the story rather than say how he feels. Let the character say how he feels, or through something that he says indicates how he feels. And we do that every day. When people say things, we can tell exactly how they feel by what they say and how they say it. So we want to do that in our stories too. So how do we make dialogue real? Because that's important too. Listen to your own conversations and listen to the conversations of others. And you try to emulate that as much as possible. And what I do when I write dialogue, I will say it out loud to myself. I'll read it, and I just say, well, does that sound like real dialogue? Does that sound like a real person talking? Well, okay, if it does, then it's believable. It's believable dialogue. There's one thing we don't want to do in dialogue, and that is make it a transcript of what people say. Sometimes a transcript, if we just listen to a conversation, we'll hear what is called word whiskers, and so on, and little phrases like that are sort of meaningless. I think we do that mentally to kind of let our brain catch up to what we're saying, or what we're saying catch up with our brain, or whatever the situation was, so the two at least match. We don't have to do that in dialogue when we write it. We can pretty much write exactly what it needs to be said. Now, sometimes we might want to say an because the character is pausing, and we want people to know that they are pausing and they're thinking of something. So we might put something in like that. However, again, we want to work on dialogue so that it sounds believable and that it makes sense. Read it. And here's a little something that I do sometimes is, if I'm having trouble describing something and I'm having trouble with a sentence and I've written it several different ways and it just doesn't come out right, I'll just say it to myself. And what I'll do, I'll just stick that in the dialogue. I'll let the character make the grammatic error, the grammatic mistake. And like I said, it kind of takes the weight off of my shoulders there. And so that's just something I do. So sometimes you read something I've written, and the character makes an error in grammar. Well, it's because I couldn't make up my mind on what grammar was correct. Here's another thing too that I think is important, is we have colloquial, or we have accents in different parts of our country and in different parts of the United States, the way people talk. And what I don't do is for instance, like if there's a certain way of saying, like, remember John F. Kennedy would say, instead of saying Cuba, he'd say Cuber. Well, if I have somebody from the East Coast, from Boston, that says Cuba, I'm going to write C-U-B-A. C-U-B-A. I'm not going to write C-U-B-A-R. I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to write it properly. However, there are times when I do use a dialect, you might say. And that's words that, let's say, for instance, as an example, words that end in G, knowing, K-N-O-W-I-N-G. Or some people will say knowing, nice knowing you, and good knowing you. And sometimes people say, well, it's sure nice knowing you. I think the same person will say the same word two different ways, depending on how the conversation is going or what they're trying to say or how they're trying to say it. So there are times I will take the same character and I will take the ing word and I will pronounce it, or I will spell it knowing, because that's the way the character says it. And at other times, if they're really in a hurry, they're going to drop the G and I'll just make it IN, and that's it. So, and I do that with the word your. Some people say, you're not going to do that. Is that yours? And the same person can say the same word two different times. And I try to differentiate that. What I don't do is use the same word, or if I'm using the same word with the same character, do I keep them the same? It just depends on how they're saying what they're saying. So just thought I'd pass that on for the writer, of course, but also I pass that on to anyone that happens to be reading my stuff and they see my character one time saying knowing and another time saying knowing. It's just because they're saying that word differently, or the sentence is differently, the mood is different, or whatever. So anyway, just thought I'd pass it on. I'm happy to say that I picked up a new sponsor from Road Apple Junction, Ohio, and I'm very happy about it. It's Nancy's Nitty Gritty Knit Shop, and Nancy sent me a script, and she said, read that script exactly the way I wrote it, or else I'll jab you with a knitting needle. And she's quite serious about that. If you knew Nancy, you'd know what I mean. But anyway, here it is, Nancy's Nitty Gritty Knit Shop, where you'll find all your things for your knitting needs, whether it's yarn, knitting needles, darning or yarn needles. Nancy's going to fire me after this. A measuring tape, scissors, yarn cutter, stitch makers, or stitch markers, excuse me, Nancy, and holders, blocking tools. Nancy has all your knitting necessities. Notice that, knitting necessities. Nancy is clever with words, I'd have to say. Nancy, I'm sorry for ad-libbing a little bit, but this is just so good. Remember, if you have any sock fuzz or pocket lint, don't send it to the landfill or burn it in the trash barrel. That's inside the limits of Road Apple Junction. Bring it on down to Nancy's Nitty Gritty Knit Shop, and she'll recycle for you. Remember, Nancy is all about saving the environment. Yes, she is. Remember, as they say all over Road Apple Junction, Nancy knows knitting, and get right on down to the real nitty gritty. Now, 1, 2, nitty gritty. Now, yeah, nitty gritty now. Ooh-wee, right down to the real nitty gritty. Nancy's Nitty Gritty Knit Shop. It's next to the Clickety Clack Cafe, next to the tracks, next to the elevator, next to the Feed and Grain, next to Ralph's Filler Up gas station and miniature golf, where a handful of peanuts are still a nickel and the air is always free. Okay, once again, that's Nancy's Nitty Gritty Knit Shop. Hats off to Nancy. Thank you for your sponsorship. And that'll be it for today. I'll put the link to Sticks down in the description section, and you can go there and read that. And comment, subscribe, and just remember, do good stuff, read good stuff, write good stuff, and see good stuff in others. Take care. Bye now.